It is at first unremarkable. 3 boxes filled with 3 letters. And yet the BBC logo, introduced in 1997, is one of the most enduring pieces of corporate design in the history of branding. Internally, it marked a quiet revolution, a shift from visual entropy to order, from typographical improvisation to gill sands. To explain the change internally, the BBC did something that only the BBC would do. They made a documentary about their own logo, starring the man who designed it. That man was Martin Lambie-Nairn, the design consultant who was brought in to modernise the BBC's corporate identity. In the video, he outlined the problems the new logo aimed to solve and introduced the design system built around it. The result? An internal communication effort that was unusually clear, effective, and charming. It didn't just explain the value of design, it sold it. A corporation not exactly known for visual consistency suddenly had a system to help achieve it, setting the brand up for the first of many digital revolutions. This is the story of the BBC's 1997 rebrand, what it fixed, what it cost, and how it imposed clarity on an organisation famous for having rather a lot of departments. When the BBC first took to the airwaves in 1927, its main visual signature was its coat of arms. It featured a lion for Britain, a thunderbolt for broadcasting, eagles with bugles for spreading the word, and a globe surrounded by 7 stars representing the other planets in the solar system. The coat of arms, along with various other logos, appeared on buildings, equipment, and eventually on television. But it wasn't until the 1950s that the BBC designed a logo specifically for the screen. In 1958, the first incarnation of the BBC's Blocks logo appeared with slanted letters inside 3 squares in a sans serif font. In 1963, the boxes were slanted to match the italicized letters. Then in 1971, the boxes were rounded and spread out slightly. By 1988, it was time for a full corporate identity. The logo was sharpened, the type was scaled down, and everything was skewed to a very precise 17 degrees. Helvetica replaced the old type, and lines in red, green, and blue were added underneath as a nod to the colours of pixels on a CRT TV. It was cleaner, sharper, and for the first time used throughout the entire corporation. Because until then, the BBC hadn't really had one logo. It had several. Different channels had their own versions, so did different shows. Sometimes the word BBC just appeared in whatever font they were using for that particular program. It was, in modern terms, a brand architecture issue, and in practical terms, a mess. Michael Peters, the designer behind this rebrand, introduced a level of consistency, but even his version of the logo had its limits. Still, it was an improvement for a while. By the mid-1990s, the design was showing its age, not just aesthetically, but technically. While working on rebrands for BBC One and BBC Two, designer Martin Lambie-Nairn noticed several issues. The 88 logo was broadly inflexible, with a slanted design that made non-slanted text beside it look strange. The lines under the shapes could fade into the background, depending on the colour, or disappear altogether when scaled down. And the shapes inside each letter would vanish at small sizes on low-resolution screens. The design was a wink to the past, taking inspiration from the BBC's logos of the 50s and the 60s. While that was a nice touch then, it now meant the logo wasn't fit for the future, with the skewed shapes and text hard to render on low-resolution screens like computer monitors. But the biggest issue Lambie-Nairn identified was the universe of bespoke logos that had spawned around the main mark. Brands as big as flagship channels and as small as the BBC Club had commissioned logos that at once downplayed the BBC element and overplayed the character of their particular brands. The spectrum of types, colours, and design styles was vast. The tangible costs were easy to calculate. Thousands of dollars in commissioning designs and licensing typefaces for bespoke logos, and high printing costs for stationery, signage, merch, and other items due to the wide gamut of colours. With so many logos detouring in every possible direction, the main BBC logo had no authority. A new logo, and more importantly, a new design system, was needed. Lambie-Nairn kept the 3 boxes, acknowledging them as an identifier of the BBC, but straightened them up. This resolved the issue of text looking out of place next to it. The lines beneath the shape were removed, eliminating the issue of them disappearing. The letters were scaled up, and the typeface was changed to Gill Sans for its elegance, timelessness, and large counters, which solved the legibility issue at smaller sizes. The result was a modern, minimalist logo that balanced function and style. It's economical and matter-of-fact, and while it's on the cusp of being almost boring, the shapes of the Gill Sans lettering give it character. Like, if we change the typeface to Helvetica, it crosses the line into bland, faceless territory. Whereas there's a lot of Britishness in Gill Sans, breathing life into what could have been a rather cold logo. The second part of this rebrand was the design system. Every station, channel, division, or, yes, club, would get the same simple treatment. The BBC logo, followed by its name in Gill Sans, in black and white. This made for a drastic cleanup of the BBC logo universe, gradually going from this to this. While valid concerns were raised about how each of these services would showcase their character through such a rigid system, Lambie-Nairn suggested they could still do so, just elsewhere. TV idents, colour schemes, content styles, and tones of voice were but a few opportunities. And Lambie-Nairn led the way. BBC Two, whose creative idents he'd launched years earlier, and the new BBC One idents that launched with the corporation rebrand were great examples. Their tones couldn't be more different, and yet their logos, on-screen positions, and even how they animated were identical. The same could be said for the sounds of the radio stations, from Radio 1
we do indeed love us.
to Radio 4.
My castaway this week is an actor.
Even the major news programs projected their individuality through their graphics, soundscapes,
You're watching BBC
and tone of voice. Yet once again, their logos were identical. The BBC's 1997 logo and design system are both seismic achievements in branding. But what sets Lambie-Nairn's work apart is his mastery of communication. Great designers don't always make great communicators, sales, or business people. But this video Lambie-Nairn created, introducing the new logo and design system internally, shows he had a grip on all 3. He clearly identifies the problem from a practical point of view, an identity point of view, and a business point of view. He emphasizes the scale of the problem, not just by explaining it, but by showing it in a bunch of different ways. And then finally, he talks through the camera to the viewer and says, "See? Silly, huh?" At which point, you'd feel silly not to agree. Then step by step, he walks through the solution, showing exactly how simple and easy it is, no matter who you are, what department you're in, or whether you like the new logo system or not. Emphasising efficiency and the tangible cost savings brought about by this redesign wasn't just important for internal politics at the BBC, but for external British politics as well. The BBC is a publicly funded organisation and comes under intense scrutiny in the UK. And projects like logo redesigns, which, let's face it, seem like vanity projects if you don't work in branding and marketing, offer critics a free kick. And despite the excellent case Lambie-Nairn laid out for the change, the redesign still copped predictable criticism for its alleged price tag.
I thought television was about programmes, not logos.
But the work has stood the test of time, and the business case Lambie-Nairn laid out in the video has mostly held. The legacy of the 1997 rebrand is still highly visible at the BBC today. In fact, the logo itself and much of the design system remained more or less intact until 2021, when the BBC rolled out a new one. While the blocks we have now are more playful with animated behaviours and the ability to morph into the logos of other services, the new system builds on the foundations of the old one. And while Lambie-Nairn died in 2020 and didn't get to see the full rollout of the new design system, his legacy lives on. Not just in the logos of the BBC, but in the way that the new generation of designers chose to communicate the change. Through a clever, stylish video.